The Premier will be announcing that later in the morning, but I can confirm that yesterday there were 42,000 tests, and overnight there's been one penalty infringement notice issued down the south coast from somebody from the Northern Beaches who travelled down there. So that says to me that the community is being more than compliant. I'm very, very happy with that situation. Those figures are good. The Premier is satisfied that the cases that we've seen over the last couple of days are proof that her measures are working, and I'm very comfortable with that as well. We do need to make sure that people that continue to get tested, and of course they also have to comply with those public health orders.
You mentioned one infringement notice has been issued. How will you enforce these zone restrictions in the Northern Beaches?
Well, the police will enforce these public health orders the way that they have been since the beginning of the pandemic, and the fact that one or two are being handed out is of course disappointing. But the small numbers that are being handed out suggests to me that the police are using their discretion, and of course that people are on the whole complying with the laws. But you cannot just rely on the fact that you'll get a warning from police. They do use their discretion, but quite regularly they will also be compelled to hand out an infringement notice. So they're doing that on the Northern Beaches with increased patrols. There's some resources being sent there, and of course those boundaries of the upper Northern Beaches area that has been earmarked out by the Premier will get special attention from police.
Minister, a Sydney aged care facility has been exposed after a resident came into contact with a healthcare worker who was responsible for transporting sick international travellers. Does there need to be better processes surrounding staff working with sick travellers in hotel quarantine?
Well, the fact of the matter is that there's no rule book when it comes to dealing with the pandemic. We have public health orders, we have a health plan, and I think the Health Minister is doing a superb job alongside the Chief Medical Officer in ensuring the ongoing situation is flexible, and any new regulations are being rolled out as and when required. But it's not going to be perfect. There is always going to be a situation when somebody comes into contact, particularly after the event, when we find out that an area has been exposed, which we didn't know at the time. The government has, of course, increased the management of those quarantine hotels. We've reduced the number of hotels down to 2 where flight crews are going to be accommodated. And if we find further gaps, then we'll fill them.
What happens in terms of New Year's Eve celebrations and the harbour fireworks? Will they be proceeding this year?
At this stage, they will be going ahead. There's no reason for us not to go ahead with the fireworks. Obviously, there will be very, very strong, strict management of crowds when it comes to those fireworks. And if the current health orders are continued, well, then people of the Northern Beaches will be told not to attend. But that's not to say that the rest of Sydney won't be able to attend. And as the Premier has said time and again, we want to make sure that everybody has as normal a Christmas as possible. And the mere fact that the contact numbers are so low, the last 2 days have been well and truly in single digits, they have been able to trace them, also says to me that the behaviour from some of those other state premiers in closing the borders was not only premature, it was actually quite cruel and unnecessary.
What is your response to other premiers' criticism of New South Wales' response to this pandemic? I know yesterday the Queensland Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk also made comments about how we're handling the outbreak here. What do you say to other premiers?
Well, I think that's a ridiculous level of criticism, because in Queensland I'm told that it's taken up to 8 hours for 4 people to get tested. I mean, we're doing 42,000 in a day on the Northern Beaches at the moment, and in Queensland I've heard reports where there's been 4 or 5 people and they've been waiting 8 hours to get tested and then told to go home in 38-degree heat. It has been said by a number of health professionals that New South Wales is world's best practice. I think that we've seen that. The fact that the figures are so high insofar as compliance and getting tested compared to so low when it comes to even with this small cluster in single figures suggests that there's no reason for me to be critical of any government's response here in New South Wales. The government response in New South Wales has been great, but I'm confident that we will continue with the compliance that we've got, and I would very much encourage the other states to consider how well we've managed it when they're looking at extending any border closures.
Minister, tomorrow will be a Christmas a bit different for some parts of the state. What would be your message for residents?
Well, I want everybody to have a Merry Christmas. This has been an appalling year, particularly in my portfolio. We've had bushfires and floods, and of course the police have been rolled out to do border patrols in areas that we haven't had to do border patrols in 100 years. So I think the first message to people is to please enjoy themselves. You deserve to have a Merry Christmas, but we also have to be conscious of the fact that there is a pandemic, obey the public health orders, and then make sure that you focus on the fact that 2021 will no doubt be a much better year.